Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host, Shawn Ennis. And today we are going to talk about something that needs to be talked about. And Shawn and I are good at stirring the pot because it's just what we do. And so today we're going to really talk about Agile. Is it dead? I recently wrote a similar post on LinkedIn talking about, is something else dead? Don't want to tell you what that something is. May have a show on that one pretty soon. But these are the hard questions that we need to start asking ourselves with, just because we've always done it this way, does this mean this is the right way to do it in the future? So I am going to bring up this slideshow here, and Shawn is going to kind of walk us through the deck that he's put together here. And we're going to have an honest conversation and go back and forth on it. I have not seen this, and we do this on purpose so that Shawn and I can have kind of a conversation and a debate back and forth. So it's a very organic point of view today from what we're seeing. So Shawn, what do you got for us?
So one of the things that I like to harp on, my harp always plays on, is a business solution is people, process, and technology in that order. And we had this technology called software that was invented, 50, 60 years ago. And in my lifetime, it went through a pretty radical change called Agile. Agile was built as a process for software. So the software is the technology, Agile is the process. Now, the reason why Agile exists is because of the people, right? When you make software, back in the day, software had a very straightforward footprint. And so we had this concept what's called waterfall, where a group of us would say, okay, this is what we need to build. We hand it over to a team to build it, and we're done. What we found out is that we needed to be more agile. And so they named it Agile. And so now a lot of people are talking about how AI does not work in Agile. And I certainly have a differing opinion. And here is that opinion. So for the last 20 years, we focused on creating process to do the limits of what our humans can do. And this is human limitations across the board. Customers want new features. The salespeople want to have capabilities that are different or exceeds the competitors. We need support organizations that stand up and say, hey, we need certain tools or standards to be followed for better support. You've got architecture people on the development side who are saying, hey, it needs to be structured a certain way. And then developers were always caught in the middle. And who decides what is being done and what is the focus of being done and what is done? And Agile really fitted that really well. Now that AI has reduced how much effort there is to deal with technical debt, where AI can migrate code much faster. AI can create code in a matter of minutes instead of weeks that developers need to be done. And then here is another thing that's very key, is in most global Fortune 500 type companies, the people who are selling it, the people who are delivering it, the people who are supporting it, and the people who are developing it are usually on different continents speaking different languages. So, whereas with AI, you could speak whatever language you want and you have that fidelity. So a lot of things have been changed. And AI removed a lot of the limitations that Agile was told to exist. So we went from Agile, from waterfall, which was a high certainty, zero flexibility kind of process, to we changed certainty with visibility, and we had many cycles and iterative loops and feedback so that if developers are off track, we could get them back on track faster. Well, that really doesn't need to be anymore. In fact, the most important piece in any kind of development at this point is now the design document. So you can iterate on the design document over and over and over again. And when you're ready to go, you can deploy a multi-agent development team to build it to spec in a matter of minutes, if not hours.
Yep.
And so a lot has changed. And so a lot of people, myself included, are stating that Agile is in fact dead. Does that make sense? The premise, David?
It makes total sense. Yeah. And if I had a position like I had years ago, I would be 100% on board, and I would be reimagining the entire definition of agility. I don't think it's dead from a practical standpoint, but I do think that Agile as we know it or have known it as it exists, that's dead. Yes, most definitely.
Now, velocity is why Agile exists. That is what the focus is in on, right? You have these process, stand-ups, grooming, retrospectives, all of these forced communication points in the process. Why? Because humans have a transient form of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how you understand what we're doing today may not be accurate, and other people may not know that your understanding is inaccurate. So you have a lot of repetition. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what you need to do. And reminding people to keep on task and being able to change that task at any given date, right? So this is the new anchor, though, when it comes down to development, because you don't need that if you have a high quality, high fidelity document of what needs to be done. So instead of spending all your time on developing the code, you spend all your time in groups defining what the code is going to do, right? And so this generation of code is now reaching zero effort. I don't recommend it. I recommend, if you're using AI to do code generation, that you go through and have a human in the loop review everything, and that you test multiple different ways, multiple different tools, specifically things like Zap and other capabilities, so that you could test and get multiple inputs to make sure you're done. But the bottom line is we are rapidly getting to a point where the cost and speed of AI, of code generation is near zero. Now, what this means is that software creation is a linguistic exercise. No longer is it a project management style approach where you're trying to get multiple humans in line. It is getting all the bots in line. If you cannot explain why software needs to exist in language precise enough with AI, the AI will dutifully generate perfect code for the wrong solution. So this is really flipping the head on software development in general. If you're using standard processes, standard people with standard skill sets to do software development in this day and age, you're missing the point. Tokens are the coin of the realm right now, not sprint points. David?
We just had a show with a lady by the name of Megan Bond, And I think it was a great show, but it also showed and illustrated and highlighted the need for human centricity within the agile process. I think, as to my comment earlier, I think the whole definition of the way that this all changes is the humans are in the loop, and agile phases don't necessarily change. And, all too often we try to talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater just because all this stuff changes. You can't just rip agile out of your current process because it just breeds chaos. But what you can do is the transformation, maybe digital, maybe not digital, but a transformation. And all of the phases from plan, design, retrospective, develop, that's all in the agile step process. Convert that to humans orchestrating through those areas and process, but the humans are there to provide the context. And then you might have teams off developing and doing whatever. But I think the whole mindset of how you contribute to the agile process and reimagining and redefining it. And I imagine, we're going to see lots of companies, Fortune 100, 500, everybody's going to be reimagining what this means for them. So I'm really interested to see how this shakes out over the next couple of months, weeks, and maybe even, I don't think it'll go much more than a year and a half at max. But we're already seeing tremendous changes with AI and the process.
Yep. And again, that leads right to, what does this mean, David? You're saying agile, hey, it is incredibly painful to throw away, just ball up, toss aside every one of our processes. And so part of the goal of this podcast is to tell people you need to start thinking about the future. And so to understand this seismic shift, let's talk about what I'm calling the great inversion. So we were very much process first oriented development, and that the process, there's certain ceremony and ritual. And in fact, people have certifications that our syntax mastery, I am Agilean, I am this, I am that. That is unfortunately expiring, right?
Well, we all have
things were done just like what happened with waterfall, by the way. There was a lot of people who were very disrupted and disappointed when waterfall went away. But what's replacing this is this documentation first. Now, a lot of people are out there already doing something similar to this with Agile. They start with the test plan. What is the outcome? We create test plan to verify that an outcome has been achieved. We create the test cases before we create the software, right? Yep. Those people who are doing that are going to have a better journey. And that's why I get this all the time. People say, Shawn, if AI coding works, why is it that most development teams are being slowed down by AI? Well, again, the technology has to align to the people and the process. And if they're in direct violation of each other, you're going to see inefficiencies. I can guarantee you AI coding does work. I mean, I'm sorry, if you're having these problems, you have a process or people issue. I'm a believer that people issues are normally process issues. And that's why I want to talk about this. So the goal is to create a fundamental document of saying, this is what it is, this is why it is, this is how it works, this is how it's implemented, this is how it's supported. Once you answer all those fundamental questions that a customer will ask, you will have a full-on architect documentation that AI can use to build. And so Before, we had all these process jockeys whose job it was to make sure everybody was adhering to the ceremony and ritual. And in the future, you're going to have a much more product manager empowered role that I like to call the intent architect. So the new engineer is shifting from implementation to orchestrator, right? And they're the ones who are going to be able to determine what is the intent of what we want AI to do for us. And it has much more need in the technical writing domain of skill sets, and then having domain level expertise. So gone are the days where you could hire a software developer who cannot write, cannot communicate, and has no idea about the customer or the domain that they're trying to satisfy. I'm sorry, that's just the way the cookie crumbled on this technology. Having better communication skills is going to separate people from a software development. David, that makes sense?
It does. And I think it presents an opportunity even for the intent circle to be broadened. I mean, this is just obviously, I would think, an example, but I think Agile is, we've known it as to being development staff. I think now that there's the context framing around this, because AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the traditional old school or legacy coding type stuff. You can start bringing people into the business, into the Scrum teams, because it's really more or less just a think tank and a validation. I mean, everybody's there to provide the context, and the more context-focused context that you have, I think the better it helps to establish the intent. So, yep, dead on.
I mean, what is stunning to many people when I tell them this is the simple fact is your marketing team who is writing copy is more ready skill set wise than your legacy 30-year experienced coder.
Yep.
And that is a systemic sea change. So when marketing people have surpassed the ability to code than 30-year veterans, you know that you're in for disruption. And this is why we're seeing so many lost jobs in the software development arena, is because of this. And this is what the technology is doing. And the technology is driving these changes because of the cost differential between how much it costs to do AI coding and how much it costs to do manual coding. So the other role that is really the other skill set, that is seeing a lot of future proofing in development is actually the quality assurance team. Now, they were the first ones disrupted, honestly, because creating unit tests can be done very, very quickly. But understanding how the product should work and what the product should be doing, and looking at user complaints and aligning it up, they are much more oriented towards understanding what customers or what the consumer of the application is actually looking for. So they actually have a leg up on those 30-year developers as well, of what I'm seeing. So again, I know for a lot of people, this is up is down, left is right. But this is why you're seeing the changes in the industry that you are. I hope I'm just trying to explain what's going on. I didn't invent the software. I didn't decide that these technologies exist. They just are. And as transformation leaders, as we are, we need to start educating the people. As we talked the other day, we need to show the leadership to make sure people understand this is just the way it's going to be. And we need to orient our people and help them get into new roles where they're going to be successful.
And that's key, Shawn, the new roles. Rather than just let your people go, you simply need to redefine them. I'll give you an example of this. So if you start thinking of traditional Scrum teams or Agile teams, it's a team and they're usually focused on a product. If you take your entire backlog across multiple products or your portfolio or PMO, whatever you want to call it, and start thinking about developing or creating minimally, I would think, and this is subject to argument, obviously, but the point is, minimally, I would think three teams, 3 pods, or 3 squads, whatever you want to call them. Is the first one is your thought leadership, your think tank. These are your people that are your context team. They know what needs to be. All of your marketing people, the visionaries, the leadership, maybe customer advocates, things of that nature. That's one team. This is going to provide the detailed, minuscule context of what's needed. Then you have the boots on the ground. This is what would be potentially considered your traditional dev team, but more along the lines of an AI orchestrator. These are the humans in the loop. These are the guardrails while you're developing the code. And then the third and final one is what you have here is the QA. Now, this is still a very heavily, deeply technical coded thing. You're looking at the AI for what it's coded. Is it right? Like, it's the last line of the defense from security standpoint. So with those 3 pillars of focus, where you have your thought leadership in one group, you've got your executors and orchestrators of AI and the actual implementers in that third group, and then your QA group, you're very well covered and focused on reorganizing or repositioning your existing staff into these new type of squads. And yet you still have all of the steps that are in Agile, but how you approach it and how you accomplish it is radically different than what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I get pushback all the time on these concepts, right?
Yeah.
Because people are saying, hey, Shawn, using AI to create proof of concepts or small little projects, okay. But things are different when you start scaling up. So let's talk about that. Yeah. For small projects, I think for quite some time, Agile has been more of theater, right? We do it because the tools that we're going to do for a small project, we use for a large project. So, a lot of those, we kind of understand, yeah, it's a bit of a waste. Maybe we'll do a stand-up every week instead of every day. Maybe we'll do a 30-minute retrospective instead of a whole day. Things like that. But for large projects, the people management is documentation management, right? The technical lead becomes the person who manages the design document, the machine readable contract that drives development. And again, the value of this is we want to understand what we want to build, how we want to build it, and it is a much more architecturally driven process. And if that means fewer developers, that kind of makes sense. You want multitudes of different architects. Like, I know me and David started working together because we think differently on a lot of things. We're both very much in the architectural side of things, but we see things differently. You will want multiple viewpoints, multiple highly educated positions and perspectives, because this will create a much more rounded document, right? So what happens here is you will end up with a much smaller group, but a much more diverse in mindset group of people. And documentation is no longer the burden of the process. It's become the backbone of it, right? So very famously, about a couple months ago, Anthropic sent out a nice white paper and did a webinar showing how you could take a tangled group of legacy code running on a mainframe and take that, create a clean functional specification without any documentation, and then do the lift and shift in AI, create everything and deploy it in a modern architecture. So this automated transformation lift and shift was seismic outcome, where it actually impacted, I think it was 21% of IBM stock when that came out.
SAP
and so,
consultants too.
I mean, this reverse engineering revolution, because AI can do it. You could take one code and translate it, not only just the code itself, but the architecture itself and how things are built. And this is a huge feature to this process. And one of the main reasons people are going to start doing these processes differently is because they want to remove infrastructure requirements and technical moats. Again, the mainframe is the definition of an architectural moat that was absolutely obliterated a couple months back. David?
Yeah, no, everything you're saying is resonating. And I had seen and read an article about SAP engineers and people in the Big Four, leveraging this, but also, on the negative side, experiencing job loss or job cuts or consolidation or lack of opportunities there. And so there's the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of the stories. But it's just because everything's still trying to land and figure out how to do what it needs to be. On the radical side, I know I said this before, but a lot of times people are just saying, hey, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In the previous podcast, I had mentioned in the news cycle, Amazon was just going crazy trying to, have AI do everything, and humans are under pressure, and, panic set in and somebody hit the wrong button or the AI hit the wrong button. There's not enough oversight. So you hear this all over the place. And so there is a yin and a yang to it. But for what Shawn's describing here about taking the scrambled mess of technical debt that comes from literally the 70s, maybe even far back as the early, or rather late 60s, and all of the mainframes and the Fortran and all the stuff, the AS400s in the 80s and 90s and stuff. These things are really coming to fruition into modern architectures in months that used to take years. And so these teams are super, super accelerating through all of this stuff. But again, if you're not doing it right and you don't have those, and I only gave an example of 3 pods, this type of project is obviously a little bit more massive for sure, but everything that Shawn said totally holds. So if you haven't done this, or if you haven't realized the theme of everything that Shawn is trying to communicate, it is basically coming down to the winners in this space, or that are doing this, have the ability to see the big picture, are the thinkers, know how to navigate through all of this. You could still have subject matter experts, but those skills are going to wind up being more of a curse to you over the long haul. So maybe try, whatever you're doing, focus on trying to take a step back to see that bigger picture, because as we become orchestrators of AI, you're going to need that intuition and the intuitivity. I can't even say. I think I just made up a word. And anyway, you need to really just be able to see the big picture so that you can orchestrate. You don't have to do the whole thing necessarily in the team, but you definitely need to be able to know. On this screen is a perfect example. You've got this tangled mess. Okay, great. AI ingestion engine. Well, what does that mean? That means at some point in that arrow, there's an ETL process, and you need to know how this needs to be organized. Now, that in and of itself breeds a whole separate sub-process for you to ask AI to say, identify all my parts of the Legos. How do I reassemble them? This is the outcome I'm looking to achieve. And just being able to just know, I got to go from here to there. And so if you're just in writing, Fortran code, COBOL code, or whatever still, yeah, you're going to get left behind pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we've got an 18-month cycle, right? I think we have about 18 months before things start moving to where engineers will be more of conductors. Now, I've had this argument with developers in the past who many think themselves as artists, and like, I am a code musician. I understand that people rationalize their skills in certain ways, but it behooves all of us to remember code exists for a business reason. If money isn't made by it or saved by it, it's just not going to exist unless it's a hobby. And again, for the people out there who really enjoy coding to create things, there is a lot that you can still do. But in the area of digital transformation, it's the transformation outcome is what is important. So, projects that previously took 20 engineers in 12 months are going to require 3 architects in 3 months, right? That's what we can expect in 18 months' time, that the standard is going to be the latter, not the former. And again, to your point, we're not interested in throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Process and projects are ongoing right now. The best thing you can do is start layering things in, trying out these tools and different processes. And if you're going to take the same people, the same process, and just change the technology, do not be surprised if you have a bad outcome. It is the entirety that you need to look at.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to your opening comment on this slide. If you are a code advocate in the artistic sense, start looking at things like Claude Code, the skills, or just being able to articulate your style, what it is that you do. There's third-party componentry or tooling out there like the BMAD method, which is really great, not for you to use it, but for you to see how it's put together. Take what it is that you do and take all your passion and everything that you're doing with it, and you can teach AI to do what you do at scale, and then you just orchestrate it. And this is going back to the earlier point of learning to be an orchestrator. You don't have to necessarily hold the shovel anymore. You just need to direct where that shovel lands.
Absolutely. So, what does this mean? Well, we shouldn't be retooling. We should be rebooting, right? And layering AI into existing processes is like adding AI pair programming to a sprint workflow. Only yields very marginal, if any, gains at all. In fact, most are seeing if you do that, it generates slower code development. And you can't kind of agile your way into the AI area. The organizations that thrive will replace the process-heavy, ceremony-driven processes with specification-driven AI-executed workflows. So the infrastructure of this world is going to be having an intent definition, right? That is what the first goal is, creating that intent definition of what this current milestone is trying to do in detail of exactly what should be done. AI can help you build that, but you'll need to qualify it yourself. And that is really the validation. Understanding the customer, understanding the industry and the expectations and the standards that need to be applied, and make sure that they are being covered. And then lastly, maintaining that living design document as you're developing, so that you tell it, here, build this, and then you're done for the day. You come in the next day, you have a version built, right? It's been tested by all your test plans. So identifying the outcome, looking at what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and then updating the specification, fixing whatever needs to be fixed, and then moving on to the next. But the most important outcome the humans can provide is actually the document, not the code. So that's all I had to talk about on this subject, David. I hope everybody can stand up and put some comments in. I know a lot of this is very controversial right now, especially with people losing their jobs. But I feel like understanding what is being said and what the future lies in front of us is the most important thing that we all need, is that education and being prepared for what the future looks like.
Well said. And that's all great information too. And I think a lot of people, and even if you're on the leadership side, you're going to have a lot of questions. And so Shawn and I can both be reached. I got the domain down here at the bottom for the Transformation Leaders podcast. So 2 things on that. If you'd like to be on the show, we're taking more and more guests this year. So we're interested in having conversations with folks just like yourself. Go ahead and hit us up out there and fill out the form at the bottom of the page. It goes to both Shawn and I, and we'll have a conversation, figure out what your topic or area of expertise or what you want to hash or debate or whatever you want to do. Just let us know, give us the idea, and then we'll figure out how to throw it into a format that works. The other thing too is maybe you're looking for some consultation or for some help. Both Shawn and I are available independently and together, however you want to take it. And we're always here and available for you on that site. You can find direct links to our LinkedIn. You can reach out that way via IM or send us a message. Or again, you can just send us a Hail Mary through that form that's out there on the website. Now, today's show was all based on a lot of great information, but maybe you want to take a little bit of this away with you, digest it in your own time. Maybe you're not one to watch a lot of video. There's a QR code in the upper left corner. And so you should be able to scan that. It'll come down on your phone. It's a white paper that goes a little bit into depth, or more depth rather, of what everything that we've discussed here. And so if you like topics like this and other things along leadership and AI and just kind of where everything's headed, join us every Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. That's all the time we got today for you, folks. We appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.